we want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity on its surface is not necessarily a retirement industry topic. It may seem like, well, I'm here to learn about my retirement plan, but surprise, surprise, cybersecurity is really important when thinking about your plan and working with Definiti. So I've asked Kurt Simeone to be here with us today. He's going to talk about Definiti's recommendations for you as a plan sponsor, thinking about how you can work with Definiti as we're working to protect your data. We want to help you make sure that you're protecting your data as well, data. So Kurt, I'll welcome you to the stage.
So just to recap again, my name is Kurt Simeone. I'm the CIO for Definiti. My role here is to manage all of the IT, including the IT people, the IT resources, the data, and probably one of the most important functions of my role is to manage the cybersecurity. And as you guys probably all know, it changes daily, so keeping up is a definite chore. So I thought I would kind of share a couple things that we do here that are probably relevant to the way you guys interact with us and the way we transfer data to you, the way you transfer data to us. And it applies to probably all aspects of your business, the way you do business with other customers as well. So I'm just going to share some of the things that we do here that probably translate into your world as well. I put on this slide on the right, the top secret hint. This is the most important slide. And I do mean that. I only have 5 slides, so there's not a ton of content on screen. I'll go over most of it verbally, but the email aspect of cybersecurity is by far and away the most important aspect of cybersecurity. So we've spent years in IT setting up firewalls, updating firmware, installing patches and security updates, and we still do all that, but nothing is as important as the threats coming over email. So yeah, you could get hacked, your server could get hacked, your firewall could get hacked, but it almost never happens now. But what happens every single day is people trying to hack your users over email. And literally, if you are going to get hacked now, if you're going to get data stolen, if you're going to get ransomware, whatever the threat is that you're going to get, it's going to come via email in almost all cases. So securing your email nowadays to cybersecurity people is the most important thing you could do. So with that said, email typically is such a target for hackers because it's easy to crack into. So most companies have email set up for all their employees, and it's protected with just a password, meaning you have a username, which is your email address, and then you have a password, which is specific to that user. And let's hope the password is not password1 or any of the popular passwords, but that's it. It's just that password. So if a hacker can get their hands on your password, they now have access to your email system, and that's a really big deal. Multi-factor authentication adds a second layer of password security to your email system, which makes it very difficult to get into. So what that means is you still have a password, and you still have to type it in to get to your email. But on top of your password, you need another device like your phone, which will get a text message or an authentication code to let you into your email. And why that matters is getting a user to give up their email password is actually very easy for hackers. There's a whole industry around the right things to say to people to get them to give you their password. It's super easy. But getting someone to give you their password and their cell phone is probably unlikely to happen. So not to say MFA is infallible, but if your users are protected with a password and a second layer of authentication, like a cell phone, it's very difficult to get into their email. The nice thing about MFA is that in almost all email systems, it's included for free. It just has to be turned on and configured. So there's a little configuration that goes along with it. So if you have an IT team or an IT person, they'll probably want to help you set that up. But there's generally no cost to adding it, and it's probably one of the most important things you can do to secure your email. Advanced threat protection. So a lot of companies use Office 365 as their email host. So I'll concentrate on that just because it's so popular. But the other vendors out there, Google and whatnot, they also offer these same types of systems. Advanced threat protection is another layer of filtering that you can turn on in your email to help you avoid some of the phishing emails and malware emails. So a lot of people use Outlook now. So Outlook has a junk mail folder. And what's built into email clients is when you get an email, if it looks like junk, a lot of the email systems are smart enough to move it to your junk folder, and that works relatively well. What doesn't work so well is those junk filters moving phishing emails and hacking type of emails into your junk folder. So advanced threat protection is kind of a general term that the industry has come up with for the second layer of filtering that you'll layer on top of your email to catch some of the bad emails that are coming in, and they are coming in every single day. There's generally a cost involved in this. For example, with Office 365, their first layer of advanced threat protection, they call it Defender. I think that's $2 per mailbox per month. So there is a cost involved in this, but the cost is warranted if it helps you keep bad emails from getting to your end users. Because like I said before, all of the hacking nowadays is happening through email. So if we can stop that before it ever hits your users, you've done a lot to protect your company. So advanced threat protection has a cost. It's fairly reasonable, but it's something you should consider layering on top of your email system. DLP, data loss prevention. This is generally a paid subscription as well. Most email clients do support this. So DLP is a way of telling your email system to look for certain patterns of data in your email before you send it outside your company. So if you are sending an email to Definiti or Definiti sending an email to you, DLP helps us to avoid sending private data over a potentially unencrypted email. So DLP looks for things like a social security number, which is 3 digits, dash 2 digits, dash 4 digits, right? So it looks for that kind of pattern. And if it sees that, it automatically encrypts the email. So we should encrypt our email anyway, but if a sender forgets to do so and DLP sees an ACH number or a routing number or a social security number, it will automatically encrypt that for you. So DLP kind of takes the user mistake out of the encryption equation. So you're not sending information over the internet that shouldn't be sent unencrypted. Activity alerting. So again, this is another one of those freebies that's usually built into most email platforms like Office 365. Activity alerting allows you to set up some rules so that when something odd happens with email, your administrators or you or whoever get an alert. What I mean by that is most users don't forward their email out of the company. So alerting can be set up so that if your user sets a forwarding rule to forward their email outside of your company, you will get an alert. And that doesn't mean the user is being malicious. The use for this is if a hacker does get into your email, generally speaking, they will set up a rule on your user's mailbox to copy all the mail they get to the hacker's mailbox, and they'll send it outside the company. So they will start to see all the financial information you get, all the messages between employees, between customers. They will get a copy of all that. So activity alerting can be set up so that if a forwarding rule is set up for a user, you can go in and find out why. You know, ask the user, hey, did you mean to set this up? And the user might say, I don't know what you're talking about, in which case their mailbox was probably hacked and the forwarding rule is probably sending your company information outside your company. So activity alerting can be set up to help you identify that and stop that. And secure share file. So share file is a term from a company called Citrix, which allows you to securely store documents and attachments for delivery to a recipient. So if we don't want to send an attachment over email because it has some data in it that maybe shouldn't go over email, we can use Citrix share file to place an attachment on a website portal and then just send a link to that portal to the recipient, and then the recipient can go get that attachment securely. So share file, if you want to securely send attachments, share file is a way to give your company a place to be able to share this information with your customers. You know, the next slide, Elke. So this is what I would consider the second most important slide. So security awareness training. So the first slide, we tried to find ways to avoid bad emails coming to your users, because we don't want users clicking anything in an email that might compromise the security of their system. So security awareness training fills in the next gap, which is whatever emails get through the filtering we put in place, now we have to ask our users to deal with those emails. So security awareness training trains users to recognize a bad email and delete it or alert somebody or whatever action you want to take. So phish testing is a component of security awareness training. Phish testing is a way to send your end users fake phishing emails. So we're trying to send them emails that would normally trick them into clicking a bad link or entering their password somewhere they shouldn't, but they're fake. So we get a report of the users that would potentially click on a bad link. So we're going to set up a program from a company that we use, a company called KnowBe4, KNOWBE, and then the number 4, KnowBe4. We set up a campaign with them to send out phishing testing emails to all of our users, and then we track which ones might have clicked on the bad links. And that gives us a report to say, all right, we have 250 users. 8 users clicked the link. We should go address some training concerns with those 8 users to kind of show them why the email should be recognized as a bad email and what red flags are in that email that kind of says, hey, this is something you should look twice at. So phishing testing is a way for you to test which of your users are most vulnerable to clicking on bad emails. And then online training is a follow-up to phishing testing. Online training is training users to understand what bad emails look like. So the phishing testing tests their kind of level of knowledge about bad emails, and then training kind of helps them up that knowledge. So we recommend online training be assigned to any new user, right? You onboard a new employee, part of their onboarding is their security awareness training. And all of your users should probably go through security awareness training every quarter, potentially. Some companies do it monthly. That might be a lot. Quarterly is probably a nice in the middle ground there. And that training allows the users to watch some online interactive videos, and the interactive portion's big because they're not as boring as just watching videos. Allows them to watch some videos that train them to look at an email and say, what's wrong with this email? And it's incredibly effective. And then the last part of security awareness training, setting expectations of responsibility. This is probably more of my opinion than an industry standard, but I'm a big fan of making us all responsible to keep our companies safe. So what do you mean by that is if you're still in an office, the last person that leaves for the day probably locks the office door behind them. It's just an expectation that the last person leaves is going to keep the company secure. Email training, security awareness training, I think we should engage in the same type of responsibility. We all should embrace the fact that we're going to get some bad emails sent to us, and it's our responsibility to recognize those emails and figure out what to do with them, which is usually just deleting them, but you may want to notify your administrators as well. But that's the level of responsibility that I think we kind of want to embrace as a company, is to say, us as a company, all of our users, we accept the fact that we're going to get this stuff, and we accept the fact that we need to be trained to figure out what to do with this stuff. You can go to the next slide, Elkie. Financial policies. So this is kind of an obvious one, but I think it's important to look at and understand. Companies, by their very nature, transfer money. Right? We may receive money, we may send money to vendors, but money moves back and forth, and that's kind of what we do. The eyeball test is something that I've always talked about with people when it comes to transferring money. A very popular way to steal money from companies now is to send an email pretending you're the CEO of the company or the CFO of the company or someone who might manage the money. Send an email to an employee pretending you're someone else and saying, hey, can you wire $10,000 to this account? We owe this vendor some money. And because it's from the CEO, the CFO, or whoever, the employee instinctively does it because they were ordered by someone above them to send some money. So the eyeball test is something I think you should consider as a company, as a policy, that whenever anyone asks you to send money, you need to see them, whether it's over Teams or Zoom or whether they're in the office next to you. If someone asks you to send money to an account and it's not something you're typically doing, on a regular monthly basis, I believe you should look at that person and say, hey, did you ask me to send this money? Is this a legitimate wire transfer? If you do that, you've eliminated almost all of the avenues that hackers can use to trick you into sending money. So it's called the eyeball test. It may not always be possible, but maybe a phone call is possible. And maybe there's another means of you verifying other than an email that, yeah, I shouldn't be transferring this money. And likewise, alternate verification. So a lot of hackers will hack into, say, one of your vendor's email systems, someone that you're going to pay money to. They'll hack the vendor's email system. The vendor has no idea. The hacker now sends an email from the vendor to you saying, hey, we've changed our bank account number. Can you now start transferring money to this bank account instead? Now that's the hacker saying that, not the vendor, but it looks like the vendor to you in the email you got. So I believe you should have a company policy that stops you from making that change without a second verification. In other words, if you get that email saying our bank number has changed or our street address has changed, our mailing address has changed, if you get that email, you should call the company on a known number and talk to someone you know there and say, hey, I got this request. Should I do this? You should never do it based on an email that is really easy to fake. Third-party audit. This is a large discussion, and I'll boil it down to a small discussion. Auditing is a large field in cybersecurity, and I say large field because there's little audits you can do, and there's massive security audits you can do. And chances are a lot of the people on this call are not conducting massive cybersecurity audits. But what you can do is a smaller scale of a cybersecurity audit that kind of tells you where you are as far as your security posture. The least expensive type of audit is basically an interview. You would hire a cybersecurity company to come in and basically ask you some questions. You give them honest answers, and they're going to give you some feedback to say, all right, I asked you if you do this with your email, you don't do this, you should start doing this, and here are some contacts you can use to start doing this type of stuff. So an interview is kind of an inexpensive way for you to hire a third party to come in and just ask you questions and kind of give you a baseline of where you are and where they think you should be and some steps to get there. A little bit more expensive is a pen test. A penetration test is you are hiring a third party to actually try to get into your systems from the outside. They don't actually go in, they don't actually do anything wrong, they don't steal any data, they just look for the holes. So you're hiring them to look at the holes in your system and tell you, hey, is there a place that a hacker could get in? You know, are there some loosely protected data that we need to protect a little bit better? That's a penetration test, and that's extremely effective for avoiding hackers coming in from the outside. Vulnerability assessments is probably the most expensive sort of IT cybersecurity audit you can do. A vulnerability assessment, just so you're aware of what it is a large scale look at your entire IT infrastructure, your employees, your data, your security controls. They look at everything, test everything, and make a massive amount of recommendations about what you can potentially change to kind of shore up your security. And that may be, you know, that may be a $50,000, $100,000 investment. So it may not be on the radar of a lot of small companies, but you should just know that it's out there. But starting with something like an interview can really help you understand where you are now and where you probably should be. The last slide, again, this is kind of more of my opinion rather than fact, but I think it's an important point. Reasonable security. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of money you can spend in cybersecurity, a lot of money. And not everyone can afford to spend tons of money on cybersecurity. That's just known. But you have to look at what does the world expect of you? What does the business world expect of you to be doing to protect your data? And it's not always an easy question to answer, but it's an important question, and something like the interview we just talked about can help you understand this. If you get hacked, and it's an if and a when, right? You can do everything we talked about in this presentation, and you can do 10 times more, and you could still lose data. You could still get hacked. You could still have data stolen from you. And I think you should look at, if that happens, and let's say the Attorney General is looking at you, or law enforcement is looking at you, or somebody's looking at you from the outside because you lost customer data. If that happened, what would they have expected you to do to protect that data? And I think that's incredibly important to ask of your own company is, if something happens to our data, are people going to look at us and say, we didn't do enough to protect it? And that's kind of where we need to be. And it's very much based on the size of your company. If you're a 10-person company, you don't have an unlimited budget. We all get that. There are still things you can do to protect your data that's reasonable for a 10-person company, that's different than a 1,000-person company. But you just need to look at your company and saying, are we doing the things that are expected of a company our size to avoid looking really bad if data gets stolen, right? We don't want data to get stolen. We want to do everything we can do to protect it. But we're all aware that it could happen no matter what we do. And if it does, the last thing we want is for someone to look at us and say, you know what, you left the door open, right? And we don't want to leave the door open for people. We want to lock the door the best we can. You know, I used to always use the analogy, if we lock the front door and someone breaks it down with an axe, there's not much we can do about that. They broke it down with an axe, but at least we locked it, right? We tried our best to secure our data. And that's all the business world is asking of you is to try your best. And you just need to be aware of what does the world consider reasonable for a company your size. And the interview we talked about previously can help you identify some of those areas. That was most of what I had to say, Elke, and I'm happy to stick around for some questions and answer whatever.
Yeah, I actually have some questions for you. So just to kind of piggyback off of what Kurt said, we understand that cybersecurity can be a bit of a challenge, especially if you're a smaller company. But one of the reasons that Kurt is here is because Definiti is very committed to our part of cybersecurity, not only in our interactions with you in doing our daily work, but also in our interactions with record keepers and financial advisors. We manage a lot of personal data, and we want to do our due diligence to make sure that we're keeping it safe. So I wanted Kurt to come to talk to us today about what our plan sponsors could do on their own behalf. I know one of the things that you talked about was Citrix share file. That's certainly something that it's available. And of course, we're going to have plan sponsor link as well. That's another area that will be available for you for securely emailing forms. In fact, I think I see a question there. Once we have the new logins for plan sponsor link, will we be able to upload distribution request paperwork instead of securely emailing the forms to the distribution's email address? Yes, Jennifer, that's perfect. Yes, that's exactly right. That will be another way for you to securely share information with Definiti so that you can protect not only your data, but we can help you protect your data as well. That's our real commitment. So Kurt, I was curious, you talked a little bit about email systems and things, ways in which a company might get hacked. What do you have a sense about the level of expense? I mean, I know it's kind of a trend. There's some conversation. Do you have an idea about how much a cybersecurity event might cost a small company if they got some of that information compromised?
Yeah. So let's look at ransomware, because that's kind of a popular thing. So ransomware is when someone will encrypt your data on your server and charge you a ransom to be able to decrypt the data. That is such a large industry, and it's crazy to call it an industry, but it literally is. There are companies that produce ransomware and try to encrypt your files. They will literally look at the type of company you are and find a ransom that they think you can afford. And it's like, it's literally that targeted. So if you have 10 employees and your data gets ransomed, they may ask you for $20,000, which nobody wants to pay, but they understand that you probably could pay it if you really had to keep your company running. If you're a couple thousand employees companies, they will literally ask for millions of dollars to decrypt your data. So there's no one answer. However, I will say that it's such a smart industry that they're trying to create there that they will literally target you, look at your company, and understand what's reasonable, not reasonable, but what you can pay as opposed to what you can't pay. Because if they try to charge you $1 million and you have 10 people, you can't pay that, so they're not gonna get anything. But if they charge you $15,000, likely you can pay that, and they'll probably get $15,000.
Yeah, it can be really costly. I want to also kind of go back, we talk about available resources, just kind of wanted to point on a couple of things that are available for you as you're thinking about cybersecurity. October, I know we just went through October. October typically is our cybersecurity month, and that's when we focus on content that we share with all of you as far as cybersecurity. And so in October, we did an article about understanding cybersecurity risks and the actions that you can take, where Kurt kind of outlined a few of those things. So that article is available online. And then the other thing is that the Department of Labor has been really instrumental in how third-party administrators and partners are taking stock and being really proactive about protecting data. So they've actually authored 6 different tips that you should be looking for as far as a partner to help you with your retirement plan, both third-party administrators like Definiti or your record-keeping platform, or even your financial advisor. And as I see this, maybe Kurt, you could speak to this a little bit. I think that as we go through different iterations of that suggestion, requirement, recommendation, they could be a little bit more stringent in making sure that the partners that you use to administer a plan are following those guidelines. Kurt, do you have anything to add to that? Anything that you know about what the Department of Labor might require for third-party administrators in being cyber secure or cyber aware?
Yeah, so I am glad that they're getting involved, and it's good to kind of push out the cybersecurity mission. I will say a lot of what they're asking is really basic stuff, and it's stuff that most companies should already be doing. So when you're looking at that type of stuff, Definiti goes really out of their way to go kind of a cut above what the industry is kind of mandating. We do a lot of cybersecurity stuff here that most companies aren't doing, and maybe it's above and beyond what a lot of companies will do. But when you are vetting any company you work with, you definitely should look at their cybersecurity landscape and better understand what exactly they're doing to protect the data. And we have certain things that we do that we can outline that, some of them I talk about here today, that we do to protect data. And any company you work with, including any company in the financial industry, should be able to outline for you the actual steps that they're taking to meet the Department of Labor's guidelines, but probably go above and beyond that, because those guidelines are really the minimum.
Right. Like I'm thinking the one thing that they do outline is, do you have anything written? And of course, I know we do. That's something that if anyone here on this call has a question about Definiti's policy or our procedures, and you have additional questions, Kurt, are you available for questions after?
Yeah, yep. If you want to give out my email address at any point, Elke, feel free to, and have to answer questions.
Yeah. So what I'll tell people, simply because we're recording, is go ahead and send us an email. You can send it to contact@definiti-llc.com, and we'll be sure to get you in touch with Kurt. And also his name and information is available on our website, so you can find him there as well. But yeah, Kurt, thank you so much for coming today. This is a really important topic, and thank you all for going through this process with us. We think it's really important for you as well. We're doing our part. We want to make sure that we give you the tools and resources that we know you might need when working with Definiti to protect your data. So thank you, Kurt, for your time today.
My pleasure.